And so this past week, I was with my workout buddy, Phil, and we went to the gym. We went to 24 Hour Fitness. And to be honest, I mentioned several months ago, I used to mention it every week because I wanted you to know that I was at the gym. But how many of you guys have noticed that I haven't been mentioning it as much? Anyone notice that? Because I haven't been going as much. I haven't been going as much, so I don't talk about it as much because you go to the gym in order to talk about it, and if I'm not talking about it, then you can come up to your own conclusions, am I right? And so the reason why is because Phil over here just did a half marathon. Give Phil a huge round of applause for finishing that half marathon. He just finished a half marathon, so he was training for that, and there was no way I was going to train a half marathon with him. And so he was leaving me in the dust with his running and so on and so forth. And so my gym days started to become more and more sporadic. But this past week, we decided to get back on board. Anyway, it was on it was Wednesday that we decided to go to the gym. And I got to be honest with you, I did not want to go. I did not want to go. Like, I was out of my rhythm. I was out of my rut. You know, I felt bad about myself. I was getting on my shorts. I'm like, God, I don't want to go. And I was like frustrated. I didn't feel very well. I didn't sleep well the night before. And man, I just did not feel like going to the gym on that Wednesday morning. And then as I was driving over, I was thinking about how often we allow our decisions to be based upon our feelings rather than our convictions. Now, my conviction is to be healthy. I am a better dad and a better person when I go to the gym, but so often I allow my feelings to dictate what I do more than my convictions. And this is going to be important today because we're going to be talking about feelings versus faithfulness. And this is important if you're in a relationship, or you find yourself employed, or you find yourself as a person that seems to hop from one place to another. We're going to talk about how sometimes our feelings and our faithfulness are at odds with one another. And when they are at odds with one another, what do you allow to make your decisions? So today we're going to be in Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 22, if you have your Bibles on your phones, or the scripture's going to be up on the screen. And we're going to be reading about a man named Balaam. A man named Balaam. And Balaam was a prophet of God who was approached by a foreign government to see their king. He was offered a lot of money to go and see the king. There was dignitaries who came and said, we'll give you a lot of money to go back to our land and to see our king. And the king sent lots of important people in order to get Balaam, which made Balaam feel very important himself. And several times this government approached Balaam, and each time Balaam left the door open, not completely shutting the door on going back with these foreign dignitaries back to this homeland that they came from. Each time, Balaam knew that it wasn't God's will, it wasn't God's desire for Balaam to go back and see this king. But each time Balaam saw them, he left the door open, and he said these words, let's see if God changes his mind. How many of you guys have been there? Like you have been at a place where like you're going down a road and you really want to go one direction, but you know God is asking you to go a different direction. And part of you's like, let's just see if God changes his mind, huh? Like you don't want to make a definitive decision, right? You're not completely jumping on board. You're not completely deviating from God's plan yet. But you're like, let's just see if God changes his mind. How many of you guys have been there? Well, Balaam is at this place where he says, let's just see if God changes his mind. And so here's the rub on Balaam before we get into this story. This is something that you have to know about his motivations. See, Balaam really wanted to go to this foreign government. Balaam really wanted to go. He wanted the money that was being offered to him. He was flattered by the king's proposal. He wanted to go because he felt important, but he knew his responsibility was to stay in Israel and to stay with God's people. Which brings us to our dilemma of the day. When your feelings are at odds with your responsibility, which dictates your decisions? We're going to start off in verse 21 where it says, the next morning Balaam got up, saddled his donkey, and started off with the Moabite officials. But God was angry that Balaam was going. So he sent the angel of the Lord to stand in the road to block his way. As Balaam and the two servants were riding along, this is really good, Balaam's donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in its hand. The donkey bolted off the road into a field. But Balaam beat it and took it back onto the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood at the place where the road narrowed between two vineyard walls. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it tried to squeeze by and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So Balaam beat the donkey again. And the angel of the Lord moved further down the road and stood in a place too narrow for the donkey to get by at all. This time when the donkey saw the angel, it laid down under Balaam. In a fit of rage, Balaam beat the animal again with his staff. Animal cruelty aside, this is a pretty funny story of what's happening. If you didn't catch everything that was happening in the story, Balaam got on the donkey and he started going with these foreign dignitaries back to Moabite to see this king. And along the road, 3 separate times, there was an angel of the Lord that stood in the road in front of the donkey. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord and decided to walk around the angel of the Lord. But here we have Balaam, who couldn't see the angel of the Lord, get frustrated and angry and in a fit of rage, start beating the donkey to get back on the road that he saw fit. See, when Balaam was first approached by this foreign government, he was obviously feeling what? He was feeling important. He was feeling desired. He was feeling privileged. He felt like he had something to offer. But here, the great prophet of God couldn't even ride his own donkey. His feelings of pride were disintegrated into fits of rage. His pride was damaged. Could you imagine riding a donkey with different foreign officials? You're riding and you're feeling important. You're leading the way. You're like, man, they came to fetch me. They offer me lots of money. I am really important. And then all of a sudden your donkey starts like going off the road. Meanwhile, the Moabite officials are still going. You're like, no, get back, get back. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing me. His ego was damaged. How in the world was a prophet of God supposed to call blessings and curses from on high if he couldn't even control his own donkey? And so his pride began to deteriorate. Man, I know that you guys know what that feels like. You walk into a meeting, you walk into a situation, you walk into the room, and you feel good about yourself, and then she says something that completely undercuts you. And then all of a sudden your ego is damaged. You find yourself in a business meeting and someone decides to contradict you and everyone else in the room decides to go with them and your pride is hurt. And here we have a prophet of God, a man who is trying to do great things for very important people. And this donkey is finding himself off the path, crushing his foot, and just laying down in the middle of the road. There was a commentator that I was reading about this passage that highlighted the irony of the donkey being able to see the angel of the Lord, but Balaam being completely oblivious. This commentator wrote, "This element may also serve to heighten the irony and satire of the story to follow. That the female pack animal is more attuned in the ways of the means of Yahweh than one of the most noble of the world's prophetic divination experts." There's something that we can learn from this, guys, is that feelings are not a bad thing, but blindly following them is. Your feelings that you feel aren't necessarily a bad thing, but blindly following your feelings will be. As we continue off in verse 28, it says, "Then the Lord gave the donkey the ability to speak." Before we go any further, yes, it says that all of a sudden God gave this donkey the ability to speak. "What have I done to you to deserve your beating me 3 times?" it asked Balaam. "You made me look like a fool," Balaam shouted. "If I had a sword with me, I would have killed you. But I am the same donkey you have ridden all of your life, the donkey answered. "Have I ever done anything like this before?" "No," Balaam admitted. This is an interesting course of events that has just transpired. Obviously, a donkey started talking. But we also learn that Balaam cared more about his pride than going the wrong way. He said, why did you hit me? You made me look like a fool." Balaam was blind to reasoning outside of his own feelings. The donkey had to ask him, "You have ridden me all of my life. Have I ever done anything like this before?" Balaam's response was, "Well, no, I guess you haven't." It's ironic that Scripture highlights here the donkey's faithfulness in comparison to Balaam's leaky convictions. The donkey, by Balaam's own words, was always faithful throughout Balaam's whole life. This was his childhood mule he grew up with that was always faithful. But Balaam's own faithlessness was leaky. He was leaving room for God to change his mind. He was allowing pride to enter his heart, and he was being motivated by greed. This is important because Balaam's faithfulness was fickle while his feelings were dominant. His faithfulness was fickle while his feelings were dominant. I'm a high-feeling person. Man, I feel all the feels all across the spectrum. And it's hard for me to make my decisions not in my emotions. I am a gut decision maker, which can be either really good or it can be really detrimental, if you know what I'm saying. And here we have Balaam probably on the same spectrum of myself, with fickle faithfulness, because his feelings were so dominant. His pride was unruly. His greed was unchecked. He found himself feeling important and now feeling humiliated. And so because his feels were all the feels, he found himself in a precarious situation. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the roadway, drawn in his hand. I want to make sure that we catch this, that the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he finally saw the angel for the first time. Balaam bowed his head and fell face down on the ground before him. "Why did you beat those 3 times?" the angel of the Lord demanded. "Look, I have come to you to block your way because you are stubbornly resisting me. 3 times the donkey saw me and shied away. Otherwise, I would have certainly killed you by now and spared the donkey." Then Balaam confessed to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned. I didn't realize you were standing in the road to block my way. I will return home if you are against my going." But the angel of the Lord told Balaam, "Go with these men, but only say what I tell you to say." So Balaam went on with Balak's officials. It took a talking donkey for Balaam to realize that he was jeopardizing his faithfulness to God for his desires of money, of influence, and of pride. And all of this could have been avoided if Balaam had from the beginning to choose faithfulness instead of choosing his insecurity. Let's just see if God would change his mind. Instead of faithfulness, Balaam followed his impulse, was blinded when God was standing in his way, and was visited by the angel of God because he was stubbornly resisting him. There's one big idea that I want to walk away with today, and I believe that if we can capture this truth, it can change the trajectory of the health of our lives. The blessing that comes from faithfulness is better than the rewards of our impulse. The blessing that comes from faithfulness is better than the rewards of our impulse. Balaam was an impulsive person. He was impulsive because he followed his feelings more than he followed his conviction. But that is not what God rewards. We see what God rewards in Proverbs chapter 28. It says, "A faithful man will abound with blessing. a faithful man will abound with blessing. And if I look across this room and I look across this peninsula, we have people who have a high desire to find blessing, but we don't want the faithfulness to go along with it. But time and time again, I see from Scripture and I see in our lives that the blessing that comes from faithfulness is better than the rewards of our impulse. Just look at your marriage. The blessing that comes from being faithful in marriage is better than the impulse of those rewards. Your marriage will be blessed when you are faithful in your marriage. When you are faithful, you're giving yourself only to that other person. You're giving them your whole heart. You're not falling into the traps and the traps of flirtation and the traps of insecurity and the traps of pornography and the traps of sharing yourself with other people. The blessing that comes from faithfulness is greater than the rewards of any impulse that you can find yourself in. Okay, so you're not married. The blessing of your future marriage is better than the rewards of your impulses today. Your faithfulness starts far before you ever put on a ring. The blessing of the faithfulness starts way before then. It starts when you're single and you're by yourself. And are you just thinking about your own impulses and your own rewards and your own satisfaction? Or are you already starting to be faithful for the person you may not even know yet? The blessings of faithfulness are a lot better than the impulsive rewards. Man, I know that just going by the gym, the blessing that comes from faithfully going to the gym are way better than the rewards of my impulses, eating my Cheetos and Cheerios and tubs of ice cream. My impulses say, eat all the stuff. But I know that the blessing of faithfulness of going to the gym and being faithful with my health and of my diet far outweigh the benefits of whatever impulsive desires I have. I see this in my marriage. I see this in my health. Man, I see this in my job. Being faithful and showing up, being dependable. Those blessings far outweigh the impulsive desire of, oh, I don't feel like it today. My dad, I was once driving with him, and my dad is highly recognized in his organization. And he was driving, and we were talking, and he said, you know what, Josh? I'm not the most talented. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the most well-spoken. But I have the recognition that I do because I said yes to opportunity and I was faithful with it. So many of us miss the mark because we don't say yes when opportunity knocks. We decide not to be faithful. We decide not to show up. We think something's beneath us. But because he sat on this committee here and because he decided to say yes to this opportunity there, all of a sudden he is highly recognized in his organization because he just simply said yes and he was faithful. But I know I am a part of a generation that has a hard time sticking in one place for too long. We are hoppers. We are changers. We are jittery. But the blessing that comes from faithfulness is greater than the rewards of the impulsive. I see this in my marriage. I see this in my health. I see this in my job. Man, I see this in the church. One of the greatest things that Sacred Church offers is our squads. One of the greatest things, man. If you want to know what it's like to grow in God and grow in community, man, you got to join a squad. And luckily we have an opening this upcoming October if you want to be able to jump into a squad. But time and time again, over the past several years that we've been a part of these community groups and doing these squads, you know what the hardest thing for people to be able to jump on board with is? Consistency. Man, it is hard to commit. And I'm not trying to undercut anyone right now because it is difficult to commit. Man, people don't have a hard time being authentic. People don't have a hard time extending trust to one another. But man, it's difficult to be able to just commit to be consistent, to keep it going. It's difficult. It's hard. And man, this past week when we had our squad, I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to clean my house. I didn't want to make the questions for discussion group. I didn't want to, open up my space and have these people come inside. Like, I didn't want to. Sometimes you just don't want to. But I have learned time and time again that the nights when I don't want to the most are the nights when God has something for me the most. Those are the most important times for me to show up, are the moments when I just don't want to. Because I have learned that the blessing that comes from faithfulness is greater than the rewards of our impulse. Sometimes it's like, guys, I'm sorry, I'm out. Because that's easier for us sometimes than showing up. But sometimes the easy route doesn't get you fit. It doesn't mend your relationship. It doesn't help you grow in God. It doesn't help you grow your maturity. The easy route doesn't grow you. And it certainly doesn't get the good blessings. The blessing that comes from faithfulness is greater than the rewards of our impulsive decisions. Sometimes there's just things I don't want to do, but in those moments when my feelings are at odds with my convictions, am I faithful or am I fickle? I want to be known as a person who is faithful even when my feelings are at odds with my convictions. I want my faithfulness to be stronger than my feelings. Even when I feel all the feelings, even when I don't wanna, even when I'm in a position where someone's offering me prestige and money, someone's making me feel important and valuable, but I know it's against my convictions. I know it's not being faithful. I know that it's going to hurt my marriage. I know it's going to hurt my job. I know it's going to hurt me in the long run. I want my faithfulness to be stronger than my feelings. And we live in a world and in a society that says, do what you feel because it'll feel good. And you will get a reward. But the blessing that comes from faithfulness is greater than the rewards of our impulse. The blessing that comes from faithfulness is greater than the rewards of our impulse. I'm glad that you guys got that. So maybe you find yourself in a position where you haven't been faithful. You know what? You've been like Balak and you find yourself going down a road because, maybe God will change his mind. You find yourself sort of flirting with this idea or that idea. You haven't been completely faithful in this area of our life, or maybe we're just sort of keeping the door open just in case something else decides to open up opportunity for you. And you are jeopardizing with not being faithful. There's a great news that comes from Balak's story. Because even though Balaam was walking down the road, it said that God appeared to him and opened Balaam's eyes. And then Balaam confessed. How good is it when God sticks himself right in front of you in whatever situation you are, opens your eyes and says, just wait one moment. Some of you may have thought that because you've been faithful or you've been faithless all this time, you have found yourself off of the road that you're done for. You've already given up on being faithful. You've already, my marriage is too far gone. I can't find my purpose. My significance is already, dragged through the mud. I can't begin to be faithful now. I'm here to tell you that God is the God of second chances. And he puts himself right in front of you in certain situations and in certain places in the path of your life, opens your eyes, and he waits. And even though Balaam did a lot of things wrong, he did one thing right, in which he saw the angel of the Lord, and he confessed. So many of us, the story of our faithful journey begins at the point of confession. And if you want to be at the spot or you want your faithfulness to be stronger than your feelings, it starts with a confession. This is the area in which I have not been faithful. I don't want to follow my feelings as a default any longer, but I want my convictions to guide the decisions that I make.